Welcome to episode 9 of Neon Genesis Evangelion, reviewed by a guy who's actually read Genesis. Today's episode, shockingly, is Neon Genesis Evangelion episode 9, Mind Matching Moment. I know, absolutely insane. You never would have guessed that'd be this episode. I'll say this much before I get into my little analysis. My previous theories about perhaps there being a bit of Abraham representation and maybe Abraham and Lot uniting type themes. I could definitely see it. And maybe a little bit of Tower of Babel theme, or even Joseph and his brothers theme. But for now, I'm just going to give the quick overview of the episode. This episode focuses a bit more on Asuka and Shinji's relationship. Asuka, of course, having been just introduced in the previous episode, she also meets Rei in this episode, and the two turn out to get along passably for the moment. But the focus is on Asuka and Shinji. They try facing down an angel who turns out to have the ability to bud itself into two different forms. So when they try to attack it at first, they get their butts handed to them. The two of them have to completely synchronize to do this. Also, Asuka has now moved in with Shinji and Misato. That's a thing. And the two of them will have to learn how to perfectly synchronize their movements so they destroy this angel's two components at the exact same time in order to actually kill it. It's not getting installed by a bomb launched by the UN, so we should be good for the moment. And in order to get this done, Misato was suggested by the lady doctor to use this plan that was given to her by Kaji, who we find out is going to be staying for a while, and is again a character with a lot more going on than he's trying to let on. The plan is to perfectly synchronize themselves in a quite literal dance, and they try for a while, but their conflicting personalities make it near impossible. When Asuka starts to give up, Misato has Rei instead replace Asuka, and Shinji and Rei get it instantly. So Asuka, with her pride wounded, decides to strike back at Rei Misato by getting it down perfectly with Shinji. The two of them are almost perfectly synchronized, and we get to the night before the big attack. And two of them are left alone, and Asuka tries to establish some firm boundaries, and then when she sleepwalks, she immediately breaks those boundaries and falls asleep inches from Shinji's face. He stays for a moment to lean in to kiss her, but when he hears that her starting to call for her mom in her sleep, he decides against it, thinking to himself that she's just as much of a child as him. He then gets into a completely different position, so the two of them are properly separated like they were initially. The day of the attack comes, and they get it perfectly right up until the very end. They face the angel with synchronicity unlike anything else, but right as they strike the killing blow, they crash into each other. So while they succeed in defeating the angel, they ended up making themselves still look like fools and begin to argue and bicker, completely embarrassing everyone else involved. And Shinji accidentally, in the heat of it, admits to almost kissing her. I don't know if there'll be anything to come of that, I'm going to be honest. But that scene did feel worth mentioning. Like I was saying earlier, I felt a little validated in some of these themes. There's a lot of themes of twos in Genesis, of like two partners, Adam and Eve, Abram and Sarai, Abraham and his nephew Lot, Isaac and Ishmael, Jacob and Esau. You have all these twos and twos and twos of these separate characters, and it seems to be this rivalry between the two of them, between Asuka and Shinji, much like between Jacob and Esau, and a bitterness much like between Joseph and his brothers. Like I was saying earlier, again validated in the Abraham viewpoint. First off, Abraham has now completely moved from one place to another. Abraham, or Asuka, has now migrated completely. She's living in Japan, completely foreign land with her partner. Though in this, it's very different circumstance, or at least her counter, perhaps not partner for this. I don't know how they're going to go with it. Maybe they are partners in the series. I haven't seen the next episode, duh. And again, you're seeing the reflection of twos, and that sort of having to learn a balance. One that's something of a counter, something that could not be learned between, again, that same thing of Abraham and Lot. That could not be learned between Abraham and Lot. Their servants and keepers and the like simply couldn't get along, so they had to separate from each other. This time seems to be opposite. They're brought closer together and are now being forced to get along, also uniting against a common threat, much like I was talking earlier about the kind of rebellion against God that was turned into then rebellion against common enemies, which is again a pretty common theme in Genesis. sort of being made to unite against a common enemy, even if that enemy's not necessarily a more physical one, such as the starvation that such as Jessica's brothers faced in their portion of the light novel. So it seems again, these constant reflections of twos and twos and twos seems very familiar in this episode. And it seems interesting how they've also set up Rei and Asuka, who at first got along. Asuka's like, let's be friends, be easier for both of us. And she's like, okay, sure, whatever. If I'm forced to, I guess. But then she feels vengeance against Rei. And she does have a very interesting line, which I'm curious if it'll have any impact on the character later. She treats it as a throwaway in the episode. She says, piloting the Ava is all I have, which could explain her more fiery temperament and passions, and her calling for her mom again. Looks like they're setting up a lot of character for her. I'm very excited to see where they go from here. I'm curious how they're going to develop her and her relationship with Shinji and how it's all going to play out in the end. But the only way to find that out, now say it with me, is to watch the next episode. So if you enjoyed, leave a like, whatever equivalent you have on whatever service you're using. If you want more of this, go and give a follow or subscription. Again, whatever equivalent you got there. Comment if you can so I know what that you feel about this one. And this is G friggin' W wishing you good night, good day, and good friggin' bye.